All right, it's time for lecture number 9. Today we'll discuss Congress. There are a few things that you should be able to do at the end of this presentation. You should be able to compare and contrast the House and Senate in terms of the qualifications for serving in each of those chambers, their constitutional powers, the leadership in each of those, how they're organized. And then you want to be able to evaluate, of these two, which do you believe to be the most powerful? Congress works in the building shown in the upper left, the United States Capitol. I have to say, it's one of the most amazing places I have ever been in the United States. If you've never toured the Capitol, I strongly encourage you to do so. I was lucky enough to do so a couple times, and you can see a photo of me and my wife at the bottom of the screen. The first topic we'll explore will be qualifications for serving in both the House and the Senate. The Constitution identifies several qualifications, and what we'll do is we'll fill in this chart as we go along. The Constitution identifies a minimum age for serving in both chambers. It's 25 years old for the House and 30 for the Senate. One must also be a citizen to be a member of the House or the Senate. For the House, it's at least 7 years, and for the Senate, it's at least 9 years. Now, I'd like to point something out. You don't have to be a citizen from birth in order to serve in the House or the Senate. In the upper left-hand corner here, you see a photo of Pete Hoekstra. He was the congressman from West Michigan. He was my congressman for many years. He was actually born in the Netherlands, and he became an American citizen over the years, and he eventually served for 18 years in the House of Representatives. In the upper right, you see Jennifer Granholm. Now, she was the governor of Michigan, but she was born in Vancouver, BC, in Canada. And then, of course, the bottom right, we see the governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was born in Austria, but he became an American citizen, and he served as governor of California. There's also a residency requirement outlined by the Constitution. It's actually the same for the House and the Senate. However, based upon tradition in the House of Representatives, those reps generally live in the district that they are representing, but it's not required by the Constitution. I've shown this map a couple of times. West Shore Community College is located in Michigan's 2nd congressional district. Okay? It's not required that a representative live in his or her district, but usually they know the strengths, the weaknesses, they know the people there, and so based upon tradition, usually people live in those districts that they're representing. The Constitution also requires that the number of House members is based upon each state's population. Every state gets at least one, but today, and then others are added based upon the number of people who live there. And today it's one for about every 700,000 people. For the Senate, there are 2 senators per state. Here are some additional criteria. The Constitution requires that House members have a term length of 2 years. It's 6 years for the Senate. While the total number of House members is not set by the Constitution, for the last 100 years or so, the total number of members of the House of Representatives has been 435. And with 2 senators from every state, and with 50 states, today we have 100 senators. Next, I'd like to explore the constitutional powers of the House and the Senate. The Constitution gives special powers to each chamber. In many ways, the House of Representatives has the authority to initiate several things. First of all, the House of Representatives initiates all tax bills. Every single time there's a tax increase or tax cut, that bill must start in the House. Based upon tradition, all spending bills are initiated in the House, whether it's on defense, education, whatever it may be. And then also, just as a little review, the House of Representatives initiates the removal process because the House has the sole power of impeachment. The Senate also has special powers and authority. In many ways, the Senate has the final say on several things. For example, the Senate has the authority to either approve or to reject major nominations made by the president, whether it's his advisors or maybe members of the judiciary, something like that. The Senate also has the authority to either ratify or to reject a treaty, and treaties are negotiated by the president. Finally, the Senate has the final say when it comes to removing someone who's been impeached, because if someone's been impeached, the Senate then acts as a jury in the removal trial. Next, we'll explore leadership in Congress. However, before we do that, we'll explore a key concept that shapes leadership and how Congress operates.
The key concept that drives much of what happens in Congress would be this idea of the majority party. Now, of course, if the party that has more members in it, it's easier for them to pass the legislation. However, there are other factors that influence this idea. First of all, the majority party is able to put people in the most powerful positions. They also are able to put people in the chairs of the most powerful positions. So this idea really is important, and they choose all of these powerful leaders. Right now, in the House of Representatives, the Republican Party has a majority. Right now, in the U.S. Senate, the Democrats have a majority. And Joe Biden, who's the president, is a Democrat. So what we have right now is called divided government. For the first 2 years of the Biden administration, Democrats controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House. That's why they were able to pass a lot of stuff through Congress. But it's going to be more difficult now, and Democrats and Republicans are going to have to work together in order to accomplish a lot of their goals.
So let's explore some of those leadership positions and some of the leaders themselves. We will begin with the House of Representatives. The top leadership position, the most powerful person in the House, is the Speaker of the House. There are a few traits to consider when exploring the Speaker of the House. First of all, a person gets to be the Speaker by a vote of all of the House members. It's always a member of the majority party, and they get together and they vote for their leader, and so that's how you get to be the Speaker of the House, by a vote of the members of your party. Next, the Speaker has a lot of authority over debate and the calendar. The Speaker can actually determine which bills come up for discussion and debate to begin with. Now, while this is an awful lot of power and authority that the Speaker has, based upon tradition, the Speaker does allow opposing bills to be introduced. And the Speaker also often doesn't vote in a symbolic gesture demonstrating the nonpartisan nature of the Speaker position. Here is the door to the Speaker's office. It's actually located right in the middle of the Capitol, right off of the Capitol Rotunda. I had hoped to view the Speaker's office, but it was closed that day, so I guess I have another excuse to get to Washington, D.C. and do the tour.
Here we see the current Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. He's from California and was first elected to the House in 2006. Now here's a piece of useless trivia. Kevin owned his own business when he was younger, but the seed money for that business came from a unique source. Want to guess what it was? Well, when he was 19, he won the lottery. Now, it was only for $5,000, but what he did was, rather than spending that money, he invested it in the stock market, and it did really well. While he was in his early 20s, he then opened his own deli. After operating this own business for a while, he became frustrated with some of the regulations and taxes that businesses had to pay, so he became involved in politics. You see some other information about his background here.
So the Speaker is the top position in the House of Representatives. The second most powerful position would be Majority Leader. Here's a one-sentence definition of what the majority leader does. It's leader of the majority party and in charge of its agenda. Essentially, because the speaker is supposed to be nonpartisan, the majority leader establishes the goals or top priorities, whether, hey, we're going to go for a tax cut or maybe a tax increase on certain Americans, or maybe we're going to push for education reform or whatever it may be. That's the job of the majority leader.
The current House Majority Leader is shown here. It's Steve Scalise. Now, Scalise actually has a really interesting background. He might be one of the only members of the House or the Senate to have a degree in computer science. He also minored in political science. He's a native of Louisiana, and prior to becoming involved in politics, he was a member of the Louisiana State Legislature. He was first elected to the House in 2008. Scalise actually was involved in a real tragic incident. In 2017, when the members of the Republican Party were practicing for a Democrat versus Republican baseball game, he was shot by a sniper. He almost died. He actually had to go through several surgeries, but he was able to make it back to Congress and demonstrated that he's really a fighter, and it's really kind of a tragedy, but he was able to overcome this, and he's now in this leadership position as a Republican in the House of Representatives. Very interesting story with Steve Scalise.
As one might guess, well, the minority leader does the same thing as the majority leader, just for the other party. So, leader of the minority party and in charge of its agenda. The minority leader tries to establish top priorities. So, if the Democrats are going to try to push for a tax increase on the wealthiest Americans or something along those lines, well, the minority leader would try to say, okay, these are the arguments against that, or whatever the party proposes as its top goals.
The current House Minority Leader is shown here. His name is Hakeem Jeffries. He was first elected to the House in 2012. Now, interestingly enough, he's one of these other politicians who has a bachelor's degree in political science. So yes, there's something that you can do with one of these degrees. He also has a master's degree in public policy, and he has a JD, or a Juris Doctorate, or a law degree. Prior to becoming involved in politics, he worked as an attorney in private practice, and he served in the New York State Legislature.
The next position would be the whips.
The current majority whip is shown here. His name is Tom Emmer. He's from the state of Minnesota. Again, we see someone with a political science degree and a law degree. He was first elected to the House in 2014. But here's another piece of useless trivia. When he was in college, he was a great hockey player. So he attended both the Boston College and the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And he played hockey at both schools.
There are two primary things that whips do. First of all, they count votes. They try to determine if a proposal will pass or not, if it will have enough votes. Secondly, if it's on the edge, they try to build support and groups of support for bills in order to try to get them passed. Essentially, they try to get members of their party to vote in favor of legislation that leadership supports. And so often it's their job to say, okay, if you're on the fence on this topic, if you're not sure if you're going to vote for it, what will it take to get your vote? Maybe a proposal needs to be modified a little bit. And it's the job of the whip to try to get those people on the fence to vote in favor of a particular proposal.
Well, here's that map again of the congressional districts in the state of Michigan. I'd like to talk about our representative next. And I think just about everybody who's taking this class would have this person as their representative. Our current United States representative is shown here. His name is John Molinar. He's got an interesting background. He actually has a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Hope. He worked as a chemist for a while, for several years, and then he ended up getting a master's in public administration from Harvard. So his previous occupations were as a chemist, but then he became involved in politics and he was elected to the Michigan State House as well as to the Michigan Senate. He was born in Midland and first elected to the House in 2014. I'm hoping to bring him to West Shore's campus. I just haven't had the chance to get him here yet. I thought I would go ahead and put this one in here. Our former representative, who's been in Congress for quite a while, was Bill Huizenga. As a result of some redistricting, he's no longer our representative, but I did get a chance to bring him to the college several years ago, and so here's a photo of him right on one of those hallways here at West Shore at the Arts and Sciences building.
Well, we've addressed the leadership in the House of Representatives. Let's explore the Senate next. The Constitution identifies a few leadership positions in the Senate. The first would be the President of the Senate.
Did you know that there was this position of President of the Senate? Well, the current Senate President is shown here. Do you know her name? It's Kamala Harris. She has another job. The President of the Senate is always the Vice President of the United States. Now, when it comes to voting, the only time the President of the Senate would vote as a senator is to break a 50-50 tie.
So the President of the Senate is the Vice President of the United States. Because the Vice President can't always be there, there's another position identified in the Constitution. That's called the President Pro-Tempore of the Senate. The position occupying this office has a qualification based upon tradition. It's a member of the majority party who's been in the Senate the longest.
The current President Pro Tem of the Senate is shown here. This is Patty Murray. She's a Democrat from the state of Washington. Interestingly enough, she's the first woman to ever hold this position. Prior to becoming involved in politics, she was a teacher. She actually has a bachelor's degree in education from Washington State University, and she became kind of a consumer and environmental advocate, and then was elected to the Washington State Senate. She was first elected to the United States Senate in 1992. Well, I tried to find some unique trivia about a lot of these people, and so I've got a couple things, I guess. When Patty Murray first became involved in politics, she wore like really nice clothing, but she always wore tennis shoes because she was always on the move. So her phrase that was associated with her campaign was that she was the mom in tennis shoes. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that Patty Murray was a former teacher. Well, she also served as a school board member of the Shoreline School District. Well, my mom worked for the Shoreline School District, and in fact, she was a school nurse, and my mom was on the negotiating team against Patty Murray, and so it was just kind of interesting. She was a board member, my mom was an employee, and so that's just, again, a dumb piece of useless trivia, but kind of interesting, I guess, in a way, concerning Patty Murray.
The Constitution identifies those positions of President of the Senate and President pro tempore. Well, the way things have actually evolved is that those positions are largely symbolic. There's not a whole lot of power that comes with it. The most powerful position in the U.S. Senate is the office of Majority Leader. Now, I talked about the Majority and Minority Leader in the House. In the Senate, they do the same thing. Essentially, the Majority Leader and Minority Leader are the leader of their party in that chamber and in charge of their party's agenda, their goals, the types of legislation that they want to support.
Chuck Schumer, shown here, is the current Senate Majority Leader. He had an interesting background where he grew up in New York. His dad was an exterminator. His mom was a homemaker. He had a perfect score on the SAT. And that enabled him to go to college, and eventually he got a law degree. In the useless information department, one of his cousins is an actress. You may be familiar with her, Amy Schumer.
After the Majority Leader comes the Minority Leader.
Mitch McConnell is shown here. He's the current Senate Majority Leader. He grew up in Kentucky and has lived there his whole life. One thing that I like to talk about with Mitch McConnell is that he's had to overcome things in his past. When he was a boy, he had polio. He suffered from polio, and he lost his ability to walk for about a year. And he had to learn how to walk again. And now he's one of the most powerful people in the United States Senate.
After the minority leader would come the whips, but there aren't any crucial whips in the Senate, so I'm not going to identify anyone there. But I did want to identify the unique role of rookie senators. Rookie senators play a unique role in the United States Senate. Often they serve as chair for debate. See, debate can go on and on and on in the United States Senate. So they get the job that nobody else wants. They serve as chair. They have to be there. It also leads to one of the unique events in American history. In 1963, the rookie senator from Massachusetts was chairing debate. And then he received a note, and he called debate to a halt. And he said, "The president's just been shot. We need to adjourn." Well, this was November of 1963. The president who had just been shot was John Kennedy. That rookie senator from Massachusetts, well, it was Ted Kennedy. So it's one of the ironies of American history and tradition that Ted Kennedy actually had to announce on the floor of the U.S. Senate that his own brother, the president, had been shot. Michigan's senior senator is shown here. She grew up in the Lansing area, then she got a degree in social work, and then became involved in politics. She was first elected in the year 2000. A few years back, Senator Stabenow visited West Shore. Michigan's other senator is Gary Peters. He's got several degrees, one from Alma, another from Wayne State, and one from Michigan State University in philosophy. He was in the Naval Reserve for several years and first elected in 2014. Senator Peters came to Ludington a few years back as well. Well, we're just about done, but I'd like to review some of the main ideas from today's presentation. This lecture focused on a comparison and contrast between the House and the Senate in terms of qualifications for serving, constitutional powers, leadership position and how they're organized. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to evaluate which of these chambers you believe to be the most powerful and most important. Well, that's all for today. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon online.